Father Vogel. We continue going through St. Francis de Sales' Introduction to the Devout Life. We're now at Part 1, Chapter 4, and in this chapter, St. Francis will go into the necessity to have a guide in following the devout life. So this is the suggestion that you have a spiritual director. So a spiritual director will often be a priest, religious, could be a brother or a sister, but somebody who's well versed in the spiritual life. And he uses the story of Tobias, who goes to travel this far off country, and God sends him the archangel Raphael, to be his guide. And so too, we need a guide to assist us along the way. So obviously we can have guides such as, spiritual writers, such as us reading St. Francis, but to have specific individuals, real persons whom we can interact with, whom we can speak to, and who can understand where we are, to be able to give us that assistance, so that we can stay on the right path. St. Francis also mentions how important it is that we work under obedience toward that spiritual director. That it's good for our soul to trust that person well versed in the devout life, to be able to guide us along God's path. That God has sent that person like the angel was sent to Tobias. Now, he does admit that it can be difficult to find a spiritual director, because to find somebody who is versed in the spiritual life can be difficult, and especially today, even more so with fewer priests that we may have, there may not be as many to be available to do that kind of guidance. But as priests, spiritual writers do very much encourage us to make ourselves available for people for that kind of direction. But there is one thing of note in this. If you're going to ask the priests for this kind of direction, you want to make sure that you have this firm commitment to pray, to go into this, to live out this devout life. Because sometimes this priest will have an individual come and they will ask for spiritual direction, and really what they're looking for is a kind of counseling, a continual counseling, rather than growing in spiritual life. So they come and they're not really necessarily wanting to engage in that kind of life of prayer. And so over a period of time, maybe like, well, you're not at a point where you're ready yet to make that kind of commitment in being able to have a spiritual director. But of course, we would encourage people, to come in on different occasions and receive spiritual guidance in specific cases that they may be having in their life. That's, of course, wonderful. Even if one is not yet ready to make that kind of firm commitment to following this life of prayer. So, St. Francis de Sales says to begin to pray that God would send such a guide into one's life. In the meantime, too, it's always good to be able to listen to those around you. So, for example, if you have a spouse that can help keep you accountable in following God's path, or also small groups where like people, maybe it's a men's group or a women's group, or that each other stay on the right path. That is also going to be very good, and so that we don't traverse this path towards God alone. Because if we go alone, it can be very easily to give up, or to start going down the wrong path, or to deceive ourselves that we are actually devout when we have these faults that we don't want to admit to ourselves. So pray, St. Francis says, for that kind of guide to help us along the path to God.